Okay, let's dive in. We are stepping into a really profound philosophical riddle today.
We really are.
It's one that was formulated, believe it or not, over 60 years ago by just the extraordinary mind of Stanislaw Lem.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're digging into chapter 4 of his foundational work, Summa Technology.
And this is so much more than just some historical curiosity, right?
Mhm.
Lem's concepts around intellectronics, the black box, and this idea of an algorithmic ceiling, they feel less like mid-century sci-fi and more like, I don't know, an operating manual for the world we're living in right now with deep learning and global complexity.
It's almost prophetic. So our mission for this deep dive is, I think, pretty clear. We want to understand how technological progress, and this is the paradox, actually engineers alienation.
Mm-hmm.
We're investigating that moment when technology becomes so successful, so unbelievably complex that the very tools we rely on, well, they transform into systems whose inner workings are utterly unknowable to us.
And we have to confront Lem's most challenging conclusion in all of this. That this lack of internal knowledge, this ignorance, might not just be acceptable, but it might actually be necessary for achieving the best possible function.
That is a tough one to swallow. So here's the hook for you, the listener. We take this enormous comfort in the idea that we are the designers, right? We're the builders, and so we're the masters of our technology.
Sure, that's the assumption.
But what happens when the machines we create, the systems that are governing our supply chains, our health, our finances, what happens when they become as functionally opaque, as mysterious as our own biological bodies?
That's the question.
That essentially is the journey we are on today.
And to really grasp the gravity of this black box concept, I think we need to trace what Lem called the historical progression of ignorance.
Or, maybe more accurately, the historical progression of specialized knowledge.
Exactly. It's not that we're getting dumber, it's that knowledge is getting compartmentalized.
Right, so let's go way back to the beginning, the initial state. In ancient times, the individual, the user, knew everything there was to know about their tools.
Everything. Absolutely. I mean, just picture a farmer with a plow or maybe a soldier with a bow and arrow. If you had that tool, you understood its purpose, its operation, and this is the crucial part, its entire construction.
You could take it apart.
You could take it apart, you could fix it, and you could probably make a new one from scratch if you had to. That knowledge was it was unified, it was transparent, it was all held right there inside the individual user's head.
And this beautiful transparency, this unity of knowledge, it starts to fracture. It cracks with what Lem identifies as the industrial shift.
Right.
The advent of mass production, the progressive division of labor. It suddenly draws this really sharp boundary right through the middle of knowledge.
And the world just splits in two. On one side, you have the people who operate and use the devices. That's the factory worker on the assembly line, the technician who just maintains a small part of a system, or, simply you.
Sure.
The commuter driving a car or riding in an elevator.
You're just a user of a function. You press a button, you get a result.
Purely. And then on the other side of that line, you have this tiny, tiny group of specialized engineers, designers, constructors. They're the ones who hold the key knowledge of how the thing actually works and how it was built in the first place.
Okay, so the knowledge isn't gone. It's just concentrated.
Exactly. The really important distinction here is that while the knowledge is no longer universal, it is still collectively present. Society still holds it.
And that brings us to the modern current state. Lem pointed this out decades ago, and it's only gotten more true. He said that no living individual knows the construction of all devices available to civilization.
And that feels so profoundly true today, doesn't it? I mean, could any single person on Earth fully design, fabricate, and then program a modern iPhone, a deep-sea submersible, and a fusion reactor control system?
No, absolutely not. It's unthinkable. That level of complexity just completely exceeds the capacity of any single human mind, period.
But we take comfort, and I think rightly so, in the fact that this knowledge isn't actually lost. It exists collectively. It's this sort of partial knowledge that's distributed among all these different specialties, documented in countless patents and databases and scientific papers.
So society, as this big aggregate entity, it still knows how everything works. The blueprints exist somewhere.
They exist somewhere.
Yeah.
Even if you have to piece them together from 1,000 different sources.
Okay, so we're currently in this state of distributed, specialized knowledge. But Lem immediately warns us that this comfort we feel, It's temporary.
It's very temporary.
He argues that this process of alienation, the removal of construction knowledge, not just from the public, but even from these collective recoverable blueprints, is rapidly, rapidly accelerating.
And that acceleration is being driven by what he calls the cybernetic leap. This is the big moment. We're moving beyond just mechanical complexity, gears and levers, into information complexity, feedback loops.
Okay, so cybernetics raises this alienation to a fundamentally higher level. Higher how? What does that mean?
It means that with cybernetic and systemic design, it becomes fundamentally possible, and eventually, he argues, practical, to create regulatory devices whose internal structure no one knows.
Not even in theory.
Not even theoretically. It's not just that the knowledge is distributed anymore. It's that the system's actual function outruns human knowledge altogether.
Wow. And this is the moment we introduce the star of our show.
The main character.
The black box. A term that Lem notes is, and I love this phrasing, favored by specialists.
That phrasing is so critical, you have to ask, why is it favored?
Yeah, why?
Because for the specialist who is focused purely on a system's performance, on the output, the internal complexity is seen as a burden. It's a distraction from the main goal. The goal shifts completely away from comprehensive understanding and toward just reliable function.
Get the job done, don't ask how.
Exactly. So let's really move into defining this functional black box, because it's a concept that's built entirely around this idea of an input-output contract. It just completely sets aside any curiosity about what's happening inside. And the definition is, it's revolutionary in its simplicity and its pure pragmatism. The fundamental requirement is this: only defined states of the input must consistently and reliably correspond to defined states of the output.
That's it. That's the entire contract.
That's it.
The transformation has to work, and that's all that matters. We don't need to know the why or the how. We only need to be able to verify the transformation.
Precisely. Because the moment you introduce the requirement to know the internal workings, you slow the development process down, you increase the cost, and you potentially limit the very complexity you can achieve. Lem saw that utility, in the end, would always trump comprehension.
Can you give us some of the application examples Lem suggests? I mean, the ones that really highlight the staggering scope of this necessary ignorance.
He was looking at systems of just ultimate complexity. He imagined a black box could be used to regulate the massive process of goods production across an entire continent, or dynamically manage the wild complexities of global economic circulation.
Or even something like orchestrating high-speed, multimodal transport management.
All of it.
You know, I find that economic example particularly powerful. We struggle so much today just to model the global economy with any kind of high fidelity. A black box, in that context, wouldn't need a unified grand theory of economics.
No, it wouldn't care about theory.
It would just accept all the relevant data points, production, consumption, labor, resource availability as its input, and then reliably generate an output. Optimal circulation decisions.
And as you mentioned before, he applies this even to the intensely personal. Imagine a medical black box. It's dedicated to treating a complex, multifactorial disease.
Okay.
The machine takes in all of the patient's biological data, their genetic data, all of it, processes it, and then it outputs a series of personalized treatments. The doctor doesn't know the exact cascade of molecular steps the black box modeled to arrive at that specific cure.
But they trust the output.
They trust the output because the system's performance is, for all intents and purposes, flawless.
And this transition from a known function to a completely unknown function, that's the mathematical mystery at the core of the black box, isn't it?
It is. I mean, today, our current simpler cybernetic systems, early regulators, simple feedback loops, they're still fundamentally understood by engineers. The relationship between the input and the output is defined by a known mathematical function. We can write the equation, y equals f of x, and we know exactly what f is.
It might be a complicated f, but it's knowable.
It's knowable. But Lem postulates the future challenge. As complexity scales, we reach a point where it is possible to create devices so complex that even the designer will not know the mathematical expression of this function.
This is the crucial leap. It's no longer an equation that you can write on a whiteboard, even if that whiteboard were, I don't know, a mile long.
Right. Think about modern large language models, the generative AI systems we're all using daily. They are, for all intents and purposes, functioning black boxes.
Their input is a prompt.
And it leads to a defined output, a coherent answer, or an image. But the function, the f of x, involves billions of weighted connections parameters spread across thousands of layers.
So the function exists.
Yeah.
The machine is doing something that is mathematically precise.
Yes.
But it is so high-dimensional, it involves so many variables interacting in nonlinear ways that it becomes functionally opaque to human comprehension.
You can no longer reverse engineer the function f of x. You can only observe x and y. And that changes the entire mission of the engineer.
So what then is the designer's task in this future scenario, if they don't even know the function?
Their task, well, it simplifies and it elevates at the same time. They are simply tasked with creating a black box that performs the specific desired regulatory actions. They define the results.
They set the goal.
They set the goal. But how it performs them, the actual complex, multidimensional mathematical function that expresses the precise dependence of output on input, that will be completely unknown to the creator and to everyone else.
And this is that critical philosophical shift we mentioned at the start. The lack of knowledge about the inner function isn't because of, technical incompetence or some resource limitation.
No.
It's because it is not necessary to know it for the box to fulfill its regulatory function.
Knowledge acquisition is deemed superfluous to successful engineering. And that is a massive, massive break from the Enlightenment tradition where knowledge was the ultimate good.
Right.
The black box suggests that in the realm of complex technological management, reliable functional truth is superior to exhaustive epistemic truth.
Well, wait a second. Isn't that inherently risky? I mean, if we don't know the function, how do we vet it for unexpected outcomes or for hidden biases?
And that is the central ethical dilemma of modern AI, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lem predicted the engineering foundation for it. His point isn't that this is ideal, but that it is the inevitable path to achieving the kind of complexity capable of managing global-scale problems.
So we have two choices.
If a system requires a mathematical function that's too complex for humans to write down, we have two choices. Either remain incapable of solving the problem, or accept the black box solution.
To make this idea of non-comprehending efficiency more palpable, Lem brings in this fantastic analogy, the centipede analogy. And this helps us intuitively grasp what it means to execute a perfect function without having any internal knowledge of the mechanism.
It's an old tale, but he gives it this new, profound meaning. So the centipede is walking along perfectly. It's a marvel of biokinetics, right?
Right.
Then a skeptical observer, a toad or something, asks it, "Tell me, how do you remember which leg to lift after the 22nd one in your sequence?"
And what happens to the centipede?
It stops. It tries to introduce conscious sequential analysis into what was a perfectly optimized functional process.
And it fails.
It fails completely. It can no longer move. And in the story, it dies of starvation trying to figure out the very mechanism that had been operating flawlessly just moments before.
It's paralysis by analysis. The second that understanding was required, the system just collapsed. The centipede, when it was in motion, was the perfect black box.
It performs this extremely complex sequence of actions, walking, navigating, balancing 100 legs in perfect coordination, without having, as he says, a clue how it manages that complex program. The micro-level execution is completely hidden from its own conscious operating system.
Which brings us to the nature of the internal program that defines the action of the black box.
Right. The black box operates on an internal program, but this program is generalized. It's simple in its expression. It's almost like a high-level command. Lem contrasts this high-level command with the infinite detail of its actual execution.
So for the centipede, the high-level program is just centipedes walk.
Exactly. Or for a predator, it's cats catch mice.
But the actual millions of steps involved, the precise timing of muscle contractions, the chemical signals, the nervous impulses, that is all encapsulated within the box and is not required for the high-level command to be successful.
Yes, that distinction is absolutely key. Simple command, non-algorithmic execution.
And this really sets the stage for why traditional engineering must fail when it's faced with this kind of complexity. It leads us directly to the algorithmic ceiling.
Right.
Let's first look at the foundation of traditional engineering, the algorithm.
Modern technological work, the traditional design workflow, is characterized by what you could call the dual creation principle. Historically, technological advancement always begins with plans, with calculations, with detailed blueprints.
So everything we build, a bridge, a locomotive, a complex water filtration system, is created twice.
Twice.
First, theoretically, symbolically, in a formalized language of calculation and algorithms on paper.
And then, and only then, materially. The symbolic language of the plans and the calculations is meticulously translated into a sequence of material actions. This reliance on a known pre-planned sequence is what we call the algorithm.
So how did Lem define the algorithm specifically in this context of cybernetics and mathematics?
For him, an algorithm is fundamentally a fixed program of action where everything is foreseen beforehand. It's a precise, reproducible, executable prescription that details the step-by-step path required to solve a given problem. Its origin is in the absolute certainty of formalized proof in mathematics.
And this inherent certainty, this leads us to what you call the reliability spectrum of algorithms. We have to contrast the theoretical with the applied.
Right, so theoretical algorithms, the ones operating purely in the realm of mathematics, they are absolutely certain. They never fail. Once you establish a mathematical algorithm for a proof, the result is guaranteed and absolute. It doesn't matter what the weather is outside.
But the moment we try to apply those pure principles to the messy, real-world applied algorithms in engineering, that certainty is compromised.
Absolutely. Bridges are calculated with immense precision using algorithms, but they can still fail.
And they fail because that guarantee that everything is foreseen beforehand is only external. It's an assumption. A bridge's algorithm is based on a set of limits: a maximum wind speed, a maximum load capacity, a specific material strength.
And if the forces of reality, a hurricane that exceeds the 100-year storm parameters, or a material flaw that was unforeseen by quality control, if reality steps outside of those set limits, the algorithm fails and the bridge collapses.
So the algorithm's success is conditional. It's conditional upon the real-world environment conforming to the designer's initial assumptions. It lets you investigate all the sequential phases, but only within those predefined limits.
The guarantee is a bounded one, and it's that boundedness that makes algorithms insufficient for managing systems of ultra-high complexity.
Which brings us to the non-algorithmic reality of these very large black boxes Lem talks about. For systems like a massive societal regulator or a global climate model or the human brain, Lem argues that a step-by-step, exhaustive investigation of these systems is functionally impossible.
They simply do not have algorithms in the narrow sense of what we call a finite automaton, a machine whose state at any given moment can be precisely accounted for and predicted. We run into a problem called the state-space explosion.
State-space explosion. Can you break that down?
Sure. Just think of all the possible arrangements and interactions within a highly complex system. In a simple mechanical device, like a watch, the number of states is finite and manageable.
Okay.
But in something like a complex ecological system, or even the weighted parameters of a large neural network, the number of possible states just explodes exponentially. Even if we could define an algorithm for every single interaction, the time required to execute it would exceed the age of the universe. It's mathematically intractable.
So even if we could create a symbolic representation of the algorithm, we write down all the millions of rules, that representation is totally useless if the algorithm isn't reproducible and executable within a meaningful time frame.
Exactly. And this leads to the core realization that defines the algorithmic ceiling. The same highly complex system, placed twice in the exact same situation, is not obligated to behave identically.
Okay, say that again.
The same system in the same circumstances is not obligated to behave the same way twice.
That is the hallmark of non-deterministic, highly complex systems. They exhibit emergence, novelty, spontaneous variation. So if a political or economic black box can't guarantee that input A will always, 100% of the time, produce output B, then traditional algorithmic design has hit its ceiling.
It's broken. The predictability model of engineering is fundamentally broken.
The designer can't provide a blueprint because the system is designed specifically to react nonlinearly and to generate novel responses. It breaks that core engineering promise of deterministic certainty.
It does.
Which means we need a new paradigm. If we can't rely on blueprints and predictable algorithms, how on earth do we successfully build something that is massively complex?
And this is where Lem suggests we look at the ultimate successful precedent.
We have to turn our focus inward.
We have to. We examine the human as nature's black box. Our very existence is the proof that arbitrary complexity can be achieved without preliminary plans or algorithms.
It's the ultimate proof of concept. We are walking, talking black boxes. Our existence confirms that building systems of this sophistication is possible without starting with the equation f of x.
And we interact with our own body like it's an interface, don't we? We command our body, and we use it to stand up, to speak, to perform a complex physical act like jumping without needing to know the internal structure. Specifically, The minute dynamics of nervous muscular impulses, the precise chemical releases, the biomechanical torque calculations.
The jumper example is perfect. The jumper knows how to jump. They execute that high-level command perfectly, and they land safely. But they lack the data on the mechanism itself. They don't have the real-time knowledge of the precise sequence and magnitude of electrical signals running down their spine that resulted in that leap.
And this isn't just about physical movement. It's about the brain, which is the closest, most powerful cosmic black box we know. It is the complex device we use every second of every day without its algorithm, and whose detailed operation remains profoundly unknown, even after centuries of inquiry.
It's a superb regulator. It's capable of creativity, of problem solving, of managing a chaotic world. But we can't introspectively access its internal functions. And this just highlights the limits of self-observation.
Yeah, Lem notes that historically, attempts to study the brain via introspection, just looking inward and trying to deduce the mechanism, have been wildly unreliable. And they've led to countless improbable hypotheses in psychology and philosophy. The system is designed to serve our actions while remaining, as he puts it, in the shade.
So why? Why is this functional concealment built into the design? Was nature, deliberately hiding the truth from us?
No, not at all. Lem explains it in terms of evolutionary economy. The concealment wasn't malicious. It was the result of natural selection making an efficiency choice.
An efficiency choice.
Evolution endowed us with the ability to think because it was evolutionarily useful for survival and reproduction. It was functional.
The survival value was in the result, being able to outwit a predator or find a better food source or build a better shelter.
Exactly. Evolution did not include the data on how we think, the detailed user manual for the brain, the molecular sequence of consciousness, because that knowledge was entirely superfluous from evolution's purely pragmatic perspective.
Knowing the neurological architecture of thought offered zero immediate survival advantage to a caveman running from a tiger.
Zero. Nature didn't maliciously hide anything. It merely eliminated any effort that was dedicated to knowledge that was, from its point of view, just unnecessary overhead. It's the ultimate efficiency decision.
And that, ironically, places the mandate right back onto humanity. Since that knowledge, the algorithm of ourselves, is no longer superfluous to us, given our scientific curiosity and our desire to replicate these complex systems.
We have to acquire it ourselves. We have to do the work that evolution didn't need to.
The lesson here is a profound challenge to engineering. Nature provided the precedent. A powerful, complex system that works perfectly well as a black box, governed purely by input-output, without the need for its operator, that's us, to understand the internal machinery. So the question now becomes, how do we replicate this result technologically, but on human timescales?
Which moves us into the crucial section, the challenge of cybernetic evolution. We had the proof of concept, but we certainly can't wait 3 billion years for the answer.
No. The natural starting point for many technologists is to ask, should we just try to copy nature? Biological evolution created the human black box through countless random mutations, relentless selection, trial and error, all across immense geological time. Should we attempt to copy this purely stochastic random process in technology?
Lem is very pragmatic here. He points out the timeline constraint. It's just not feasible. A purely cybernetic evolution approach, simply throwing random parameters at a supercomputer and waiting for a functional system to spontaneously emerge, would consume millions, if not hundreds of thousands of years of effort.
It's an unacceptable time sink for human technological progress. We don't have that kind of time.
We don't. So the path forward cannot be a simple, dumb replication of nature's process. We need a technological shortcut. We need a strategic, aggressive approach to building functional complexity that bypasses the need for exhaustive blueprints.
This necessitates radical exploration.
It does. We had to test all the possible paths for building black boxes, particularly those paths that were closed off to biological evolution, or maybe those where biology achieved solutions we still don't comprehend.
And since we already established that only a very complex regulator can effectively manage a very complex system, whether it's the global financial system or the climate, the entire focus of the search must be for these highly complex regulators.
And the key insight here is that these regulators must be physically constructed in a way that allows them to embody non-algorithmic complexity. They have to escape the constraints of traditional linear circuits and predictable silicon architecture.
So where are the search zones for these new regulators, these artificial brains that defy algorithms? Lem casts a truly wide and unconventional net here, suggesting places that fundamentally move beyond 20th century engineering concepts.
He does. He directs us to biochemistry, to the inherent complexity within living cells, and to the molecular structure of solids. He is essentially saying the solution lies not in making better microprocessors, but in making computing organic, or at least materially emergent.
Why biochemistry? Why living cells? What's special there?
Because these systems manage complexity efficiently without explicit, step-by-step algorithms. A single living cell, for example, is a master regulator. It takes complex input nutrients, hormones, signals from other cells, and it produces life-sustaining output division, energy, protein synthesis, all without a centralized, readable code for its entire operation.
So its function is embedded in its physical structure.
Exactly. It's in its physical molecular structure, not in some sequential program that we can read and reproduce line by line.
Lem is essentially saying we have to look at the natural world, find the mechanisms that successfully manage chaos and complexity, and then figure out how to engineer them. We need materials and structures that inherently do the regulations simply by existing.
Yes. The goal isn't necessarily to reverse engineer a complex biological structure, like a specific section of a mouse brain, but to find a construction process that yields a functionally equivalent non-algorithmic regulator, one that manages chaos and novelty better than any linear deterministic system we could ever calculate.
And this brings us to the foundation of success, which is the final, and I think surprisingly optimistic, note in Lem's analysis.
What we know is crucial. We know what we want. We want highly complex regulators capable of managing our largest global systems. And we know what we are looking for, a means to construct them without a complete reproducible algorithm.
And most importantly, we have the tutor, nature. We know from nature that the task of creating systems of arbitrary, non-algorithmic complexity is fundamentally solvable. The entire biological world, including our own bodies and brains, is the ultimate proof of concept.
Therefore, Lem concludes that knowing this, knowing the solvability of the problem and having a clear goal already accounts for half the success. The task is no longer defined by impossibility, but by required effort and exploration.
That is a tremendously humbling realization for the human ego, isn't it? Our greatest technological challenge isn't creating the black box. It's accepting that we may never fully understand it, even when it's solving our biggest existential problems.
It forces a change in our scientific value system. It shifts the focus from deep, exhaustive knowledge to reliable, functional outcomes. A successful technology is one that works perfectly, regardless of whether we can mathematically or logically define its internal function.
We trade comprehension for sheer, reliable capability.
Exactly.
Okay, let's summarize the key takeaways from Stanislaw Lem's incredibly powerful exploration of the algorithmic ceiling.
Firstly, and this is the big one, technology naturally drives us toward systems we cannot fully explain individually. The division of labor first made knowledge specialized and collective, and cybernetics is accelerating this toward total alienation, where knowledge is genuinely lost to collective human understanding.
Secondly, the black box itself is defined purely by functional input-output relationships. Its internal, complex mechanism is irrelevant to the user and potentially even to the designer, provided the results are reliable and the system fulfills its contract.
Thirdly, systems of ultra-high complexity, like the human brain or a future global regulator, they defy traditional algorithmic modeling because they are non-deterministic. They are not obligated to behave identically, even when placed in identical circumstances, and that just breaks the whole blueprint model of engineering.
And finally, the ultimate engineering success lies not in copying nature's millennia-long timelines, but in finding a technological shortcut. We have to move our search for complex regulators beyond traditional silicon and into the unconventional zones of biochemistry and molecular structure, where non-algorithmic complexity is naturally embodied.
Lem forces us to acknowledge that the highest achievements in engineering might demand a kind of resignation from full comprehension.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. If the ultimate, most powerful technological regulator must be so complex that its function remains mathematically unknown even to its creator, does true technical understanding cease to be humanity's primary goal?
We value results.
Right.
Curing disease, stopping climate change, managing global conflict.
Yeah.
If the black box achieves those results, is the inability to explain how a price we're willing to pay.
If we don't know the function, if we only know that the input yields the desired output, how much trust can we truly place in systems that operate beyond the scope of human verification? We've accepted this trade-off of knowledge for capability, but what are the hidden costs of that transaction?
It's a philosophical tightrope walk that contemporary technology is making us perform right now. We invite you to consider where the line between reliable function and necessary comprehension should be drawn in the age of the black box.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the algorithmic ceiling. We'll see you next time.